Welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. I am your host, Lauren Green. Join me this season as we discuss the political news of the day, the issues that matter to you, and the impact all of it has on our future. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. I'm your host, Lauren Green. Today is a scary day, friends. This week has been a scary week with an opportunity to continue into this weekend. You all know that I have long been a proponent that we all need to fight right now. I don't want to hear whether or not you voted for him. I don't want to hear like some version of you've done the work and so it's on other people now. Like, we all need to be paying attention and locked in at every single level, because what we are seeing is authoritarianism moving in the daylight and in real time. Let's go back to the beginning of this week, which feels like forever ago, but it began with an unconstitutional intervention of the National Guard in Los Angeles. Despite state and local authorities saying that the National Guard were not needed, President Trump sent them in anyway. And I'm sure by now you've seen clips or footage of ICE agents and the National Guard targeting protesters, journalists, and immigrants, all in the name of law and order. And then as solidarity protests popped up across the country, or people started pushing back in their own communities, other governors, cough, cough, Greg Abbott, are calling in the National Guard, all in an attempt to preemptively quell any protests, all in an attempt to normalize the police state that they want us to live in. And then today, California Senator Alex Padilla, in his state, like in the state he represents, went to a press conference where Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was speaking. He had questions for her. We didn't even get to hear what those questions were because he was cuffed and removed by security. And while that in and of itself is incredibly alarming, what was even more alarming was the fact that the Department of Homeland Security put out a statement following and saying that Senator Padilla did not identify himself and lunged at Secretary Kristi Noem. So here's the thing about press conferences. They're full of journalists and reporters and cameras when done well. And the entire thing is recorded. Like, we can see when Secretary Noem is speaking, we can see when Senator Padilla starts trying to ask his questions. He was nowhere near her. And while he did make moves towards the front of the room, they were never in general proximity for anything like a lunge to even occur. And we hear him identify himself. So yes, you knew who he was. No, he was not in danger. And he was still cuffed and forcibly removed as you were expounding, maybe even probably lying about why the National Guard is in his home state. And so in addition to you being there when state and local officials said that it wasn't needed, we now see that federal lawmakers, when they attempt to advocate for their constituents, are being actually roughhoused by law enforcement. This should be alarming to everyone because they are lying right in our face and there is no recourse for the American people. Like, what does it mean to live in a world when, like, you can see something happen with your eyes and actively know that the government will tell you that did not happen or that something else happened? We are outside of hypotheticals right now. This is our actual reality. And all of this is leading up to the president's military, i.e. birthday parade this weekend. For those of you who did not know, there's a gigantic military parade this weekend. It's like the 250th anniversary of the Army, and also happens to be Flag Day, and also happens to be Trump's 79th birthday. And so they've got this big old thing planned here in DC, a whole festival of things that they want done. And part of that is a parade where they will be rolling tanks down the street. When asked or discussing this parade this week, Trump already is sowing seeds for violence. He's already saying if you protest his parade, you will be met with force. If we zoom, not quite all the way out, but just like 2 levels above these issues, there's just a couple tangible reasons I have to get off my chest that are ultimately rooted in why we should not have elected an insecure man-child in the first place, but that is not what this episode is about. The first one is that we are in a recession. America is in a recession, maybe even globally. I'm not super great at the ripple effects of the economy, but all signs point to, in the US, things are not good right now. A recession of pretty significant proportions is upon us, and all data I've seen says that it will get worse before it gets better. That's just sort of categorically true. We're seeing shrinking across every single industry. That's just where we are. On the other side of it, the United States is also in the midst of funding a genocide being put on by the apartheid state of Israel toward the people of Palestine. For the record, from just like a messaging and comms perspective, this is the least popular war since like Vietnam. And while we aren't sending soldiers over directly, we are funding a lot of this and protecting Israel in international circles. And so when you put all of that together, the idea that this president saw fit in the midst of a deep recession to spend, quite literally, y'all, tens of millions of dollars on an unnecessary parade. Estimates I've seen have been anywhere from $25 to $45 million. 6,000 soldiers, all to roll tanks down the street and shoot rockets off for what is probably just his birthday, is not a good thing, especially when what always shows up when we're in a recession, what always shows up when we're having budget conversations, as Congress is right now, is that the military budget is overly inflated. So you're going to parade that overly inflated budget like down the streets. Let's also acknowledge that we know what they are doing with the money that they have is funding a deeply unpopular, it's not even fair to call it a war, deeply unpopular actions across the world. And again, we're going to roll those tanks down our street. And let's not forget that the last time this man's supporters gathered in Washington, D.C. was for the January 6th insurrection. And the reason I note that is if you remember the inauguration, there were some weather issues. They weren't able to gather. And so most people ended up watching the inauguration on TV, either in their hotel room or at a bar, or if you were lucky, you got into the Capital One Arena, right? But there was not the same level of gathering that there was for January 6th. And so the idea that we're going to roll tanks down the street with people who literally the last time they got together tried to overthrow the government with the military in tow, are we supposed to pretend like this is not a gigantic national security threat? Like this is not something to be deeply alarmed by as a resident of DC and as someone who just cares about the country? So you're telling me we've already got, according to everyone, limited funds. And what we do have, y'all want to spend on this when you're already in the midst of a terrible PR campaign about the military budget?
I would like to take a moment to open a conversation on the president's coherency. If my memory serves me correctly, we spent 4 years with people on both sides of the aisle deeply concerned about President Biden, that he was losing it, that he was not aware of the day-to-day functions of the United States government. And in the time since he has left office, it's proven that that was not unfounded. We have heard from his staffers. I think there was a book about the way they hid things from the American people and were not forthcoming. That is its own problem. But to be clear, the current occupant of the White House is also deeply unwell. This weekend, he turns 79. Is that not the same age President Biden was when he took office in 2021? I'll save you some math. It is. And for all of the hand-wringing about his age and whether or not he was able to function, y'all turned around and put someone else who's the same age, but without a deep history of public service. You've got someone who has a deep history of treason and self-interest. And what's clear is that the goal here is to criminalize dissent. The goal here is to say that the government will do what it wants to who it wants, and you/we will take it. It's the way that the Palestinian protesters were treated on college campuses. It's the way that immigrants are being snatched off the street and out of work and out of their homes right now. It's in the way that we are having a military parade in the middle of a recession. And to be clear, to the extent that dissent is criminalized, we are no longer a democracy. I do not care how many elections we have. If you cannot peacefully protest, if you cannot disagree with the government, if you cannot petition the government for your grievances, then we are not free. And that should be alarming to everyone. And before y'all hop in the comments with the woke and the hotep, we were never free, I do want to be clear. I am not saying our previous methods were perfect. But there is a difference between your rights being infringed upon and taken advantage of and not having those rights. There's a significant difference. And if you think those are the same, I would encourage you to reevaluate those decisions. Those are just categorically not the same. And keeping that in mind, we have to fight to hold on to the little bit that we do have. You all know that I love ending my show with a call to action. I want people to be able to do something. And so my CTA today is that this weekend, in addition to the military parade, there are a host of counter protests being organized by No Kings or some, I'm sure that's an amalgamation or a bunch of different organizations. But if you are in a place in your body, mind, spirit, and physical location and think that that is something that will benefit you and you will get something from that, feel free to join the protests that are happening, listen to your organizers, engage, and advocate. To the extent that you do not feel safe doing that, whether that's because of your body, mind, spirit, or physical location, my heart goes out to you. However, I would like to ask for you, in whatever practices you have, to pray for rain. Rain in Washington, D.C., to pour from the high heavens. Secret Service does not allow umbrellas. I want it to rain so bad these people can't even stand outside in ponchos. Okay, they are estimating up to 200,000 people being here for this parade. I want to ask you to pray, call the ancestors, send the rain vibes, whatever you need to do. But my prayer for this weekend is rain, and so much rain that these people do not enjoy themselves. That's it from me. That was this episode of Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. You can find me on social media or shoot me an email. I'm always glad to hear from you. Take care. That was this episode of Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. If you want to hear more of the show, visit unbossedunbotheredandunfiltered.com. If you want to reach me, find me on Twitter and Instagram at Miss Lauren D. Green. That's MS Lauren D. Green. Hope to hear from you soon.